It's not every day you hear a lawmaker call something 100 times worse than Watergate, but that's where we are at with Arctic frost. Missouri Senator and Senate Armed Services Committee member Eric Schmitt joins us now. Senator, thank you for being here.
Great to be with you.
So we're hearing now that the name Arctic frost was not randomly generated like FBI case names are supposed to be. Arctic frost is the name of a specific Florida orange, and the thought is that the only person indicted was the quote-unquote orange man. What does that tell you?
Well, this is another symptom of Trump derangement syndrome, but I think that for the viewers at home to really understand the scope of this, it really is breathtaking. And I mentioned 100 times worse than Watergate. That may be an understatement. What happened was 3 days after President Trump announced he was running for president, the entirety of government and the Justice Department was weaponized against him to bankrupt him and his family and put him in jail for the rest of his life. So what happened? In Atlanta, a state case was, created to go after President Trump. The number 2 person in that case met with the White House. Alvin Bragg in New York began his criminal trial against President Trump, and the number 3 person left DOJ to go join Alvin Bragg's office. Then, of course, you have Jack Smith, who's notorious in prosecutor circles as the henchman you assigned to go get your person, the show me the man, I'll show you the crime kind of prosecutor. He's a total dirtbag. Brings this case against President Trump. But it wasn't just a war against a man, Peter. This was against a movement. So Arctic frost was going after not just President Trump, but sitting United States senators with subpoenas. The Republican Attorneys General Association, I happen to be the chairman of that organization at the time, Charlie Kirk's organization, this massive dragnet to sweep up people because they were Republicans. That was their crime. So this is sweeping. It's huge in scope. We're just getting this information right now because of whistleblowers. If President Trump wouldn't have won, all this stuff would be buried. But whistleblowers have come forward. We need Watergate-style hearings for months on this to continue that investigation. There ought to be probably charges brought, eventually resignations. And one final point, Judge Boasberg, who's become notorious from the FISA courts, also making a speech trying to thwart President Trump's agenda before President Trump got in. And then, of course, somehow ending up with all these cases in the D.C. area, even though he wasn't the assignment judge, actually wrote in an attachment to these subpoenas to the telecommunications companies that you can't tell Senator Cruz, you can't tell these other senators that the subpoena was out there because they would destroy evidence. That's just beyond the pale, and I think impeachment proceedings should begin in the House of Representatives.
So part of the reason that this is such a head-scratcher in reading about this last night and this morning, the Biden DOJ technically did things the right way in that they got court orders to spy on Republicans, 197 subpoenas. So was this an abuse of process, or does the Justice Department just have crazy rules that make it really easy to spy on whoever they want?
Well, of course, the subpoena power for a special prosecutor is enormous, and it can be abused. That's the challenge here, right? Having served as an attorney general before being a prosecutor, it's an enormous amount of power given to one person, and you have to have restraint. But the reason why Jack Smith was appointed here is because he doesn't have that. He's notorious for that. There's other cases where he's been disciplined for that. So the reality is this is a guy who was set out to go get President Trump. And it didn't matter how they got it. But then, of course, that turned into something bigger. And they used January 6th as this predicate to sweep up organizations whose only crime was they were conservatives. They supported President Trump. And we just simply can't have that in this country. It's a really dangerous road to go down. And I think that, again, there need to be consequences here.
Jack Smith is still saying that he wants to come and testify in open hearings, open congressional hearings. He obviously thinks he's got the goods on somebody. But if he does testify, Republicans like you, with a lot of cross-examining experience, could cross-examine him. So is that something that's going to happen?
Bring it. I hope so. I do think, though, that the thing that has to happen first, though, is, and I mentioned these kind of Watergate-style hearings, we need to get all of the information, because what we don't want to have is a situation where Jack Smith, because of some of the records that are still closed from grand juries, he's the only one who's seen those. I think we need to be able to see all of this stuff. And I think the more that we see, just like the revelations from Chairman Grassley this week, further kind of highlight the abuse that took place through Jack Smith. I also think, by the way, we ought to have an investigation about the coordination that happened. There's no reason in the world why a state prosecutor in Georgia would be meeting with the White House about a state charge. There's no reason why the number 3 person at DOJ would leave that position to go to a district attorney's office to get Trump. So I think we need to understand what kind of coordination was happening with Jack Smith, with these other prosecutors. There's a lot more there. I think we need a lot more information before we have those hearings, though.
And so you're saying it's 100 times worse than Watergate. Watergate-style hearings are incoming. With Watergate, there was clear accountability. Nixon resigned. So who do you want to resign, or who do you want to be impeached as a result of this down the road?
Well, I think we've seen enough for Judge Boasberg because of the abuse, I think, by basically through judicial fiat saying that sitting U.S. senators would destroy evidence. He had no basis for that, and that was his ruling. And I think it's worth an inquiry of, he was on vacation, Peter. When President Trump came into office, he was on vacation. The D.C. area has 1 assignment judge per day. He wasn't the assignment judge. He was the presiding judge, but he's on vacation. He got these cases at 1 in the morning. Was he tipped off? There's a lot more there, but I don't think we can have, the sort of the full menu of accountability till we know everything that's out there. But I do think there's accountability that should come. And I think, Peter, if you step back and put this in the broader picture, whether it was Russiagate to prevent Trump from being in office in the first place, then being laundered through intelligence agencies to sideline a presidency, then the FBI pre-bunking the Hunter Biden laptop story so he wouldn't get there again, then 3 days after Biden comes in, the censorship regime begins, then 3 days after President Trump announces he's running for president, you saw this stuff. There's a conspiracy that begins at the very beginning that started about 10 years ago. And a conspiracy, if you're a co-conspirator in mile marker 1, even though you take an exit ramp in mile marker 5, you're still a co-conspirator and liable for the criminal activity of mile marker 10. I think we're at mile marker 10. So I think this conspiracy that began with Clapper and Comey and Brennan 10 years ago, I think that needs to play out in court as well.
This is a crazy story, Senator Schmitt. So thank you very much for joining us. And as things happen, please come back.
We'll do it.
All right. Thanks again.